one of the reasons why medication gets a bad rap sometimes is a lot of people think it's like a magic pill, right? They think like, okay, I'm just going to give them medication and then they're going to get better. They're going to be able to perform better in school. Well, all the medication really does is like maybe slows the brain down a bit to enable students to control their impulsivity, but then they still need to learn the processes.
Awe Genge, this is Mental Mythos, hosted by Asagot Toto. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Mental Mythos. I'm your host, Asagot Toto. And before we dive into today's incredible conversation, I have a small favor to ask. If you enjoy what you hear today, please take a moment to rate and review our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Your feedback not only helps us improve, but also helps others discover the valuable insights we share every week. And if you find today's episode particularly inspiring or insightful, don't forget to share it with your friends, family, or anyone you think could benefit from it. Thank you for your support. It truly means the world to us. Now, let's get back into our conversation. To start, can you tell our listeners a little bit about your journey from teacher to founder of an AI powerful app? What inspired you to make this transition, and what problem are you aiming to solve with this app?
Yeah. So, I've been, I was a attorney a long time ago, worked as an attorney. Then I went into a tech company for a while. And then I got kind of burnt out a little bit in the entrepreneur space, and I decided to go into education. My wife's been in education for a really long time, and I decided to go into education. So I try to keep the long story short. I taught for 7 years in elementary school, into middle schools, in different places. And then I left education and I started to work as an executive function coach, taking on students who have complex learning challenges from psychiatrists and psychologists that are located in New York City. And during that process, a lot of the psychiatrists were kind of wondering how I was getting, really good results with some of the students who hadn't been really responding to either medication or, typical treatments. And I saw that I was doing like a combination of the fact that I had education experience, and so the academic level and helping kids to bring their down their anxiety or their stress level, or their symptoms of ADHD. And so I started having a lot of good success. And so the more success I had, the busier I became. I would have people come to me who were looking for help with their child. And my capacity was I didn't have any more capacity to bring on new people. And because of my unique background, families were telling me, they had tried executive function coaches before, they had tried other tutors before, and it didn't really work out so well. And so and I think because of those people didn't have the same experience level I had. So I started to try to figure out like what I could do to maybe magnify or, amplify what I did. And particularly too, I've taught in public schools, inner city public schools, inner city charter schools. And now I'm kind of like working with students who go to like independent private schools. And so I've worked with the whole range of people who have not that much money to people who have a lot of money. And then what was interesting is after a while, I started realizing that everyone was having the same problem, unfortunately. And, people, obviously the people that I have privately could afford my services. And then when I was out of the classroom, I was like, well, I know that I want to help even more people. So when the whole AI boom started a couple of years ago, it was kind of the first time where I started to try to figure out, well, how could I possibly use AI? So again, I had the technical background from in 2009 when I started one of the first fitness apps for the iPhone. It was called My Genius Trainer. But since I had that idea, that level of interest. As soon as I heard about this new movement, I said, oh, maybe this could be a way potentially where I could kind of use AI at first just to help myself, just with like more help more people. Um, but then, the more I read about AI, there are obviously lots of these large language models that can do like the similar kind of thing. It's kind of normalized. But the more I read, it seems like the shift was going towards, okay, now we have these models. What can we do? How can we really harness the power of these AI models to really do something more than just kind of um, regurgitate information, right? A lot of times it's almost like a glorified Google search sometimes when you are chatting with the model, and it seems pretty cool because it's interactive with you. But, you could necessarily get the same information from a Google search and kind of going down that road. But the power with AI, what I've been reading and kind of now know is like, if you can put in like a decent amount of expertise and train the model that's already existing on on a very narrow scope of expertise, then it becomes very powerful. And so that's the journey we've been on. So, now we've taken this AI model that we use that's kind of like the general model, and now we've created our own data sets. So I've created data sets on all the different things that I've worked on, or research in the executive functioning field, self-regulation. And now, our AI acts like a very good executive function coach. And it's really cool because it is interactive in a way. A person can be interactive, which is where the power of LLMs come from. It sounds conversational. You can go back and forth with it. And that's kind of how this whole idea came to be, and how kind of this mental health and coaching can be put in AI in a really good form.
Mm, mm, mm. You've been into different, I would say, different fields from attorney, tech, education, and coaching. That's a marvelous thing, and also being one person. And you mentioned back when you said that in tech company, when you said that you were burnt out. What would you say the reason for that was?
Why I got burnt out?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, early on, I think everybody has to kind of be mindful of that, of themselves. Like, I think what I tell a lot of even I have some adult clients as well. And first, I always try to say, like, you have to be kind to yourself. First and foremost, you can't expect like everything from yourself. And so when I was in my early company I had, we were doing well. The more success I had, the more headaches came though, at the same time, right? So you kind of like get a new client, and then you build up to a certain level of client. And then like now you're dealing with like larger companies, and those responsibilities grow. And then the more valuable the company, sometimes they want more things included for free in a way, because they
Mm,
see that you're small, and they think that you're going to do a lot of these things, which you should do a lot of times if you're trying to grow your company, depending on your vision. But, you know, pretty quickly, if you kind of go down that road, you can quickly get burned out. And I think it's just being hyper aware that that could happen, and then being fair. Like, okay, how do I feel right now? Is this really where my vision lays and how I wanted this to go? Um, And it kind of goes into this whole executive functioning thing, right? It's like a goal-oriented behavior, or future-oriented thinking, which kind of can help you stay out of a lot of these problems early on. So I kind of had a limit where I said, okay, if I'm always on my phone, if I'm always on my laptop, if I'm always like trying to put out fires, then maybe I either need to like grow the team more, take more money, which also probably brings a lot more headaches, or I need to adjust my positioning. And so I think having that like forethought helped me to realize, okay, this is not what I saw happening with the company early on. And it was success, but it was also a bigger burden that I wanted to take on. And since I kind of made that deal with myself, I was able to constantly, measure um, that constantly measure it, every day, every week, how am I feeling, checking in with myself, and then all of a sudden being like, oh, it's too far, it's too much of a headache. I'm not having any more fun with it, or
Mm,
success isn't really worth the headache because I've already made that deal with myself. If I was another person and said, okay, I can take more than that, then maybe I wouldn't have burned out. And it took a while for me to burn out, quite frankly, but I was more aware of like where I wanted to be as a person, more so than just like making money.
mm. And you mentioned something that you said that you must be kind to yourself, and it took me to the conversation that I had. I think it was yesterday with as Grace, where we spoke about toxic relationships, and we took it to a perspective of business in terms of sometimes for money we can sacrifice even our mental well-being. Being people, as you've said, people seeing you so small, being so small, and thinking that they can, in terms of abused power over you, just think that you need them in order to have this business. So it's something that really took me back to that. And also, before we move past, you mentioned that you were a coach, and you kept mentioning executive coaching.
Mhm.
What is that?
Yeah. So, just to go back what you said, yeah, I think it's important for listeners, especially young people. And this kind of goes into my next part about me being a coach, but I think early on, I think that we all have to kind of learn how that it's important, but it's also okay to advocate for yourself. Obviously you have to listen and learn and grow because we are in an environment with other people. But not only self-advocating for yourself to other people, but also self-advocating for yourself to yourself. It's like, what are my limits? I know I'm small, or I know I'm like this, whatever. I don't want someone to take advantage of me here. So I know that like when that happens, I'm going to need to be aware of that.
Mm,
And I guess it kind of goes into what executive functioning is. So a lot of people will say like, they'll say like, oh, they'll say, oh, you're an executive coach. So that means you only, coach C-level employees or executives in companies. No, that's not actually what executive function coaching is. That's kind of like executive, like consultancy or something like that. Some people do say executive coach, but it's not executive function coaching. Um, so what executive function is at its base level is basically any type of internally directed behavior that a person does to then reach an external consequence, be it, or an external goal. So let's say, and that includes things. Some people just say, oh, executive functioning is just prioritization and organization. Well, that's part of it, but it's like the lowest part of it. That's like kind of the basics of it. So let's say if we take that definition, it's any internally directed behavior. So internally directed. So something that you decide that you're going to do to then reach an external consequence or an external goal. That's what the definition is. So an example of that, let's just keep it simple, could be trying to eat healthier. Let's say that someone wants to lose weight, for example.
yeah.
And so their goal, their consequence that they want is to lose weight. So then they need to if they set that goal, they need to now do some internally directed behavior, so then they can reach that goal. And so those things it could include prioritizing what you should eat. So that's prioritization. Obviously, there's motivation involved. You need to be motivated to get out of the situation that you're currently in. So if again your goal is to lose weight, you're in a place where you find out, okay, yeah, I want to lose weight. So then you use that current condition to kind of compare to the future consequence of losing weight to be your motivation. So that's kind of like the building blocks on how to exercise this executive functioning. And then everything that happens within that process is an executive function. So going to you're at Starbucks one day and you're getting a coffee in the morning and you know that you kind of want to lose weight. Okay, good. I'm just going to get a coffee today. But then you see like the lemon slice with like the icing on it. Those are delicious, or the marble slice, whatever, in the pastry shelf. And but so then you looking at that, that's some sort of like um that's like a inhibition. That's like a sensory input that you're getting from the outside world. So then you look at that slice of cake, and that's like an input stimuli, right? So we're all constantly having input stimuli, and this we could talk about this later too, regarding how this affects education or even mental health. But we have these input stimuli always hitting us in the face, right? Obviously, we are constantly on our phones, input stimuli. But let's just go back to this example. Now I see this cake. I need to be able to inhibit my natural reaction to ordering this cake, right? Because now I have this future consequence of um, losing weight that I'm motivated to do, but there are some executive functions that need to happen for me to reach that goal. And another one of them is inhibitory response to an input stimuli. And so now we're like looking at this cake and I'm like, oh, I want to eat that cake. But no, I now know that I want to lose weight. So I resist that urge. And so that is also an executive function because now you are using this consequence that you want to reach. You are motivated by that, and you kind of have set up like what you can eat as far as like you maybe organized or planned what you should be eating, which is again another executive function. But now you have this input stimuli that you now also have to resist, and that's also an executive function. And so then you resist it and you successfully kind of exercise that portion of that whole process. But if you don't, then obviously the person doesn't succeed in that portion of inhibiting that response, and so they eat the cake, and then they kind of maybe don't reach their goal.
Mm. And you mentioned something about mental health, and as you've said that you like to dive deeply in terms of that. How does executive function work when it comes to mental health in terms of someone being anxious, someone or being depressed? How does that executive function work?
Yeah, so I think it really comes down to first like what are the input stimuli that may be making someone feel depressed or feel anxious or have some sort of OCD response or anxiety, right? So and then realizing that those are the things that are making you feel that way, right? It's hard. It's like an honest conversation. Again, like kind of going back to that simpler idea. It's like an honest conversation. Um, so that's one thing. It's like we're constantly having these like input stimuli that we don't really have control over. We can't control over what we see when we go outside. Like we could go outside and see something really bad happen, right? Or something really bad happens to us. And that's like, I mean, that's like the worst thing that could happen, right? If it happens to you or even you see it, those are all input stimuli. And so then that's where it becomes this, on the executive function part, okay, how do I inhibit this response? Um, and what's the overall goal of what I want to do or feel? So let's say someone's in a toxic relationship, and you brought that up with something. Um, when you go into, I did actually recently did a TikTok video for the marketing agency about how executive functions can help you in like relationships with people. And I think anytime you go into a relationship with someone, this is just an example to answer your question, you know, you kind of have to understand that there will at some point be a consequence of this relationship, be it good or bad.
Mm.
Um, and it also a consequence to how you feel. So we have a couple of consequences. We have the consequence of the relationship itself. So how are you going to feel in that relationship later on? How do you want to feel in that relationship? And then also the consequence of how you feel as a person as existing if you didn't have a relationship, so then you want to, you should be mindful of those things that you want to have happen, because that's like a future goal oriented or another consequence, because then you can use that as the test of how things are going along currently. So then if you get hit with an input stimuli, so let's say again, go back to the toxic relationship, let's say someone's abusive,
mm,
um, and they, either it's physically abusive or, verbally abusive, mentally abusive, some sort of um, process like that, then you are able to compare that to this future you where you're like, wait, I've kind of thought about this relationship in a different way. I really wanted it to work.
mm,
You're in current self, but you're looking to how you thought it was going to go. Because again, that's future oriented, like thought processing, which goes into what you should be doing constantly as a person. And once that doesn't match up, if you're like, oh wait, I don't like the way this feels. This is toxic, right? We can name it. We can all name it. And then sometimes it's hard to get out of them sometimes because you just don't know. Maybe people haven't really done all of the thinking about how they want to see it go. But if you've kind of seen it all the way through, it makes it easier to kind of change course and be like, wait, this is not what I want. I wanted it to be this, this, and this. If this, and this is not happening now, it's probably not going to happen later. So it sometimes can make it easier to readjust the current condition, right? Because now you're in a current condition that you dislike more so than this future consequence that also is probably not promised to you. So it's easier to just get out of it. But I think you know, it helps in mental health to kind of understand that like this is the process. It's a simple process to do. It's hard to exercise the final part of like removing yourself from that relationship, but it does give you a little bit more self-awareness where you can plan what you want the outcomes to be.
mm. And you mentioned something that I always try by any means to better myself in terms of self-awareness and being and try to read the environment around me and how much I'm aware. And as much as I want to get on that conversation, and we are left with some quite, I think, more than 7 minutes. But I don't want this conversation to end. And as much as I like the conversation of executive coaching, but I want to get deeply on your app. Um,
Okay.
how can you tell us about the app's features and how it uses AI to help students improve their executive function skills?
Yeah. Yeah. So what we realized or what I realized is like, students like the homework time is such an anxiety ridden situation for a lot of students. Parents, students, the family, it's like a very hard time. Like parents feel like they need to try to get their students to start. If the students don't initiate their tasks right away, then the parents are accusatory, like, oh, you're just not doing your homework because you're being bad, or stop procrastinating, or all of these things that happen, and then it just builds up. And so the first thing I in my mind is like we just need to bring down the temperature, so to speak, of this anxiety in the whole household. So what Uleru seeks to do is first like remove the need for parents to kind of try to get their students to initiate the tasks, because most of the time students don't initiate, or they look like they're procrastinating, not because they're being bad, not because they simply don't want to learn, but simply because they don't feel prepared. Maybe the school, teachers, they're moving up very quickly. Education is kind of weird these days. No one's
Mm,
really focused on the processes of learning. And so then they just get homework and they go home and they literally don't know how to do it. They just sort of like, I didn't learn this, or maybe I got notes, but they weren't explained to me perfectly. Or even, we're in this day and age of something called the flipped classroom, where it's actually a practice where teachers won't give the actual content. They won't teach the content until the next day. They'll give them homework on things that they haven't covered yet, and they want kids to do their work and like try out things. But kids don't know how to. If you don't know how to do it, you're not necessarily going to even try because there's no way to do it. So what Uleru does is it provides context to assignments. So it's not a new curriculum. There's so many different applications for math teaching, for reading, for all these things, and kids are just confused because they have to go to. I have a sixth grade girl, one of my students who I've worked with for the last 2 years, and she's in sixth grade, and there could be one of five math applications that she should use for homework. Like it could be a Desmos one day, it could be Khan Academy one day, it could be IXL one day, it could be a physical worksheet another day. Um, and in all those respects, like it could all be a little bit different with what the answer should be, the way it should be delivered. So Uleru is like this coach that sits next to them that the only thing it does is it helps them focus on just solving the problem at hand. So the AI will notice that it's doing math and it will give them strategies on how to problem solve for math. And students can rely on it by saying, okay, taking a step back and just working on the process of problem solving, how to break it down carefully. And then if they really need to pull a ripcord and get even more help, they can ask our AI chat that to help them with the steps. And the cool thing about the AI chat that we have is it only helps them through the steps. So it'll walk them through the steps, but at the very final thing, it won't give them the answer. It'll ask them, okay, what did you get as the answer? And so then they could test the answer with Uleru before they enter it into their homework. And so not only are they getting the support, but they're actually getting reinforced the step-by-step processes. That's just an example.
That's quite amazing because we, as probably as parents out there, they are figuring they are I think they're skeptical in terms of thinking that most AIs definitely offer the answers, and without the actually the student of learning what's going on, how can I do this without the AI in terms of figuring answers? That is very quite a genius. That was very innovative for you actually. And also, as much as we could talk about regular students, and you mentioned that you've worked with students that had you have helped students that had ADHD and ADD. So and also students who took who were taking pills and others. So, in my answer is that how does Uhuru help those students that have mental health, mental disorders?
Yeah. So it helps again with the executive functioning. So a lot of students, let's go to a student who may take medication. Um, and the reason, one of the reasons why medication gets a bad rap sometimes is a lot of people think it's like a magic pill, right? They think like, okay, I'm just going to give them medication and then they're going to get better. They're going to be able to perform better in school. Well, all the medication really does is like maybe slows the brain down a bit to help to enable students to control their impulsivity, but then they still need to learn the processes. So in that case, Uleru is there still teaching the processes of the reading that they're doing. Let's say they're reading Frankenstein. It's a fiction book. So Uleru gives the context around how to organize thoughts, how to prioritize the thinking, how to craft an answer based on solid, just foundational principles where they can like slowly and methodically learn the processes while they're on the medication. If a student isn't on medication, we try to create the same thing because Uleru still provides, we're still staying with the ADHD students, it still provides those external reminders of what to do. So, one of the things that you should do for students who have ADHD anyways is try to externalize as many things as possible so they're constantly reminded about what to like how to do something. And so Uleru is always there to provide this intervention of wait, I'm reading this history assignment and I have to answer these questions. But wait, I don't even know really how to find the main idea. And then, the teachers are asking all these other questions, but if the student can't access what the main idea is, they can't really comprehend it. So Uleru's there to say, hey, this is a nonfiction text. These are the three main elements of nonfiction. Find the overall topic, what's the teaching point about that topic, and then find out and just figure out how the author feels. And so trying to teach them how to combine those things to find the meaning, and then they can hopefully successfully start to initiate their homework and initiate the task of answering the question. Even if they have to like write short response questions or short response answers, it tells them this is the way you should structure your answer. Write your claim and make sure the claim is, supported or can be supported by evidence from the text. And so all of these like external reminders that happen in the moment is what's most powerful. And it's why it's more powerful than even just like a tutor coming once a week. So even myself, you know, even the wealthiest family, again, I'm just talking about this because I know the differences. Some
Mm,
families can afford somebody all the time. Okay, got it. But like most people can't, and most people don't even have the time for that anyways. But also the only way that these kinds of strategies become internalized is when they happen in the moment. And
mm,
so Uleru is there in the moment for every piece of homework that they're doing, giving them these strategies, which they can then eventually become habits for them.
mm. And I'm seeing that we are out of time, and I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today and for your insight and passion for helping students with executive functional problems. And I feel like this app of yours is very beneficial because there are, I would say, teachers out there who find it hard to keep up with students that have ADHD, those mental health disorders, and those who sometimes students become too hyper and they can't sit well in classes. So I think this app is a way of combating that problem. And also one of the things that the fact that I had in actually a episode, I I shot an interview towards 2 hours ago where I spoke about the education system of not having inclusion when it comes to mental health. I believe that this app it's revolutionary and it's a very innovative a lot. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate you and thank you for your
Oh, yeah, thank you so much. And I would love to come back maybe in the new school year and we can talk more.
okay, no problem, no problem. I'm an email away. I'm an email away on that. We can
Yeah.
definitely do that. We can definitely do that. And also, when can people find you? And also, do you have any website? The reason I'm asking this is the fact that when the episode is out, I would like to share it with you.
Yeah. So it's just www.theularu.com. TheULuru.com. And yeah, we're on TikTok at
Mm.
the Uleru. And yeah.
Free audio post production by alphonic.com.